All right. Welcome back to another episode of, BG Perform Reacts. It's going to be a weekly series where I dive into opinions, topics, things that people bring up on X, just diving into it, giving my opinion, giving my background, and all things fitness, wellness, performance, and just doing that, how I see fit. If you do want to join my coaching group and you want to learn more about the way that I coach, the way that I think, the way that I've built my career, and how we help build coaches' careers every single day, join the Coach Connect. You can click the link in my bio, or you can just reach out to me with the word Coach Connect, and I'll get you all set up for that. We're running a 2-week special right now where you get the first 2 calls free. We do weekly calls on the topics and the curriculum that we've designed. So reach out. We'd love to have you join in. It's a great opportunity, a great group. I'm really excited and happy with where it's gone. And I think it's got so much room to grow. So looking forward to that. So definitely would love to have you. So we're going to get started. We, as always, I got all the stuff here on X, information that I find. So just diving into it. So this was a tweet from Pat Basil. Exercise order matters. Follow this: explosive movements, jumps, throws, and sprint. Main strength movement, squat, clean, bench, etc. Main assistant movement, RDL, lunge, row, etc. Accessory work, trunk. Fast, first one fresh. That's a hard one to say. Heavy before fatigued, and finish with the pump. And this is, I 100% agree with this. I think exercise order is really just as important, if not more important, than exercise selection. I think obviously choosing the right exercises is really important, but I also think deciding the order in which they're done is where you get the most out of each one, right? And I think the way that Pat describes it here, always start with your explosive movements, start with your jumps, the things that are more mentally demanding, right? So the things we have to really think about to do. Technical things, skill work, things that we might not be as proficient at. Start that as early as possible. Give yourself the most amount of energy, the most amount of mental capacity. That way you can fully focus on that skill. Then from there, we'll do that main strength movement, like he says: squat, clean, bench, row, whatever it is that you want to focus on the highest output for your strength movement for the day. And then this can be 1, 2, maybe 3 movements, depending on the length of the session, the accessory work that you choose. I always choose the first one, like he wrote here, which is basically like choosing the main accessory work to that main movement. So, for example, if I'm going to do, let's see, like a squat, for example, there's a couple things I might do. It might be a leg press next. It could be a hinge. It could be like a supporting accessory thing, or it could be an antagonistic accessory. Whichever you feel best for the individual at the time. And then after that, there might be another accessory work for whatever it might be, like the second most important thing, and then maybe like the third most important thing, or just accessory work that fits the goals of the individual as well. And then at the end, you want it to be very low skill and still maintain high output. So think curls, extensions, core work, things that aren't going to demand as much technical or mental demand from the individual, but they're still going to be able to do a lot of and get a nice pump, which he kind of wrote here. So I would like this. Really good work on that. Greta Oberacker, hope I said that right. Primers performed before a game wake up, quote unquote, the nervous system without causing fatigue. They boost athletic performance by increasing power / speed, coordination, body temp, and reducing injury risk. Warming up your mental focus is just as important. And I love this. This is something I don't know if I see a lot of people do, and I used to do this all the time with a lot of the fighters who were that I was with for fight week, specifically the ones who, still enjoyed training. Some people just don't enjoy the training thing, or they just have a ton of weight to cut, so it doesn't really, unfortunately do much for them, which sucks. But for a few of the people, especially Ian, that I worked with full time, during fight week, instead of like doing a full session, I would essentially at the start of each day, to just wake up his body, I would take him through the warm up and like the skill work that I wanted him to do that would essentially get him ready to start lifting, and then we would call it. And you'd still get that same central nervous system activation. You still work on the coordination, you get the body temperature up, you get all these really important things, and then you get to rest, right? And that's just something that you want to be able to get used to turning on the body when you need it and then go and performing after. So this quote unquote like waking up the nervous system is such a crucial piece. I don't know if there's any like specific science behind it, but it's definitely something I've always used, and it's good to see people talking about this as well. Jeremy Toohey, if you want more transfer to the sport in S&C, prioritize unilateral training in your strength program. Front foot elevated split squats, single leg squats to a box, barbell reverse lunge, rear foot elevated split squats, Hatfield split squats, which I love, which was that variation right there, skater squats, and single leg glute ham slide board. So yeah, I think single leg work is really important. I think also understanding how to properly load single leg movements and all the variations that can go into it, and really the benefits you can get. I think a lot of the times they've kind of talked about some stuff recently that there's just some athletes who are a little bit stronger in the single leg setting. Really depends on like the height, it depends on the movement, that sort of thing. But with a lot of younger athletes, we just want to understand exactly what we're trying to get out of this, right? And obviously with single leg movements, for the most part, generally speaking, we're probably not going to be able to lift as much load over the course of time as a bilateral squat. But that does not mean we cannot get stronger from this. It does not mean we cannot take away a lot from this. Coordination, working on. I really enjoy single leg movements because we get a little bit more carryover into gait cycle, which is what a lot of athletes try to work on, or why a lot of athletes are training in the first place, is just improving the functions at the hip, the flexion extension, the internal external rotation, and really just learning how to strengthen each leg and use the hip properly in these ranges of motions and in these movements. So I think this is 100% right. You're going to see more carryover in strength conditioning when you prioritize single leg train. Oh, well, I wouldn't say. Well, yeah. I guess I'll say this for right now. Like, you will see carryover into the sport. That does not mean that bilateral training does not give you what you need. It's just very dependent on the individual and the skill level and whatnot. Because to get the most out of a back squat, you need to be very proficient in the squat to get that full strength stimulus, right? Also, we just want to be smarter. Sometimes these athletes, these people, they don't need to do those sorts of things. And like the single leg movements provide them with enough intensity at a lower output level, so they're not putting themselves in harm's way, they're not getting hurt, they're still getting that stimulus of strengthening the leg, strengthening the squat pattern, making sure everything's working, and they can be really beneficial. It's just really dependent on the sport. It depends on what the outcome needs to be, but you can't really go wrong with single leg movements. 4 ways to develop explosive power from Alex Simeone. Incorporate jumps and plyos, throw more med balls, utilize dynamic effort method, and implement contrast training. Yes. I think one of the things I always get frustrated with when I see this type of work is you have to set the person up for success, right? And I think one of the things you see here is effort. You can see the speed at which these guys are moving. You can see the explosiveness at which they're moving. You can see even the facial expressions, the height, the work they're putting into these things. All of these things are great for explosive power, but just because you're mimicking these patterns does not mean you're going to get better, right? You need the effort. You need to be fully exerting yourself, and you need to put the athlete in a position where they can fully exert themselves. And what I mean by this is you can see a couple things here, right? Like, especially on these throws, especially on these rotational things, you're actually seeing, I wonder if I can pause this. Yeah. So I wonder, I always think about this, especially with these types of movements, right? When we see these sorts of things like these throws, oftentimes we'll see people who do these types of movements and they're not even reaching full hip extension. Like, this is nice triple extension. Like, this is exactly what you want to see in this sort of movement. And it's very hard to mimic this, right? And a lot of people will try to use snatches and cleans, but it's very hard to mimic this true triple extension where the toes, knees, hips, everything is extended through this position. And these are really crucial ways to reach that, but you have to put them in the right position for it. You have to use the right amount of weight. You have to have the right setting, because you can't just do a med ball throw inside of a gym. Like, it doesn't really work. It doesn't make sense. So this as well, throwing rotational things. These are, again, I see a lot of people who do rotational work, and you can see the main part of this you want to look at is the hip, right? You'll see a lot of people who work through this range of motion and they're just using their arms or they're just kind of rotating. And I think the one coming up next, that's a good one. This one. So like these types of movements, you can see the transfer of the power from the foot into the hip and how it kind of transfers over and goes through. And you can see this foot planted, rotating at the hip first, which is creating that power. Then it's transferring into the hands, into the wall. This is what we want to see in this sort of movement. I see too many people who are doing this sort of thing and their hips are staying squared. They're just moving their arms across their body, lackadaisical, and they're like, oh, well, this is what it looks like to do med ball throws. So like I must be getting powerful. And obviously that's not the case. You want to be intent. You want to move with intent. You want to be intentional. And that's how you're going to carry all this stuff over. And all these movements are really beneficial and can definitely give you speed and what Alex Simeone writes as explosive power. Zach Goodman writes, we only do 6 exercises total per training session, sprinting, jumping, and strength work all in one session. This takes us between 45 to 65 minutes. Simple, brief, intentional, and brief. I agree. I think too many people get caught up in way too many exercises. I think, in the grand scheme of things, when we go through developing training sessions, we want to be efficient. We want to make sure that everything that's going on inside of these sessions has a purpose, right? And I think a lot of times we get caught up in just doing stuff just to do it rather than having a purpose and filling time. I think a lot of people, they want to have an hour session or they want to, whatever. And it's like, if you get your work done in 30 minutes, good, go recover, go train or go sleep, go eat good food, go do something you enjoy. Like, don't just fill time just to fill time, whatever you need to do, get in, get out. And that's what I feel is the best of the best. Gary DiFilippo says, some of the best athletes lift heavy, lift the right way, and have success. Do you? I agree. Now, I want a little bit of a caveat to this. This doesn't mean you want to put people in a position to force things, right? I think a lot of these athletes, they lift heavy, and that's where they're going to get a lot of the benefits of training, right? But I also think range of motion, right? And in the right context, I think staying safe in a lot of these areas. Sometimes with the heavy lifting, it can put athletes in a position where, they're doing things unnecessarily. Now, I think what I'm seeing here is great. And I think, at the end of the day, the biggest thing for me always with athletes is it going to help them practice more? Is it going to help them get better at their sport? And that doesn't mean it has to look like the sport. And I think that's the biggest mistake I see in strength conditioning. We see things that are having to, and that's what I really like about this video, reverse lunges is not something you're going to see Steph Curry do on the floor, right? But this allows him to gain strength or range of motion or whatever to work through something that's going to translate to better performance, right? Give his body the capacity to play his sport at the highest level. And that's what strength conditioning is. Strength conditioning is not taking the basketball court and bringing it into the gym. It's showing you, hey, we have function of the body, and for you to best move on the floor, we need to work on those functions of the human body. We need to train them accordingly. So 100% lifting heavy is what a lot of people need to do. I think it's just obviously that can get, some coaches can take that too far and make it the only thing that shows success in the gym. So Julian Locasto says, here are my top 5 methods to actually build explosive acceleration. 10-yard max speed sprints, loaded sled sprints and hill sprints, positional isometrics, heavy sled drags and pushes, build absolute strength. Save this and go run faster. So I agree. To me, sprinting's absolute speed is very difficult, right? And when we talk about acceleration, we're talking about, speed off of that first step in a lot of sport. Now, in regards to sprinting, it's a very long process to get very good at that acceleration phase. And acceleration isn't always the same in all sports, but all this stuff is very beneficial. And especially this last one. And I think just being strong, it creates a better opportunity for you to be explosive, right? Like, you got to think about, if you're not moving weight, if you're not creating adaptation, if you're not going through that process, just like we kind of just talked right here, right? It doesn't have to be, 1 rep max loading, but creating that adaptation and being able to do things like pushing and pulling and rowing and pressing and, working through different ranges of motion, extending at the hip, flexing at the hip, working through all these different things. That's what's going to create that first, what he calls insane first step. And that's going to help you create acceleration. So I think all these things are very beneficial, just have to be loaded in the right context. I think this is the same guy. No, this is another guy. I think he had a tweet earlier. But hips holding you back, question mark. Here are the 16 hip movements to unlock you. Now, this one, I agree and I disagree. And the reason I disagree is because I want you guys to kind of watch some of these videos, especially this stuff. And I think, let me see where it is. This looks really good. So like these hip drills, right? These are very popular amongst people. Like they're FRC, functional range conditioning, that sort of thing. They're like, and there's a couple things we want to address here. Not to be like, nitpicky, but the reason why I don't like a lot of these things, the RDL and the airplane, I really think you want to get as good as possible at those as you possibly can, right? And I think those, I always joke with my clients, like I think a lot of coaches, they'll say, the like drop and give me 20, drop and give me 50, like for the push-up. My go-to is, drop and give me 10, well, stand and give me 10 RDLs and airplanes in the middle of nowhere. You should be able to stand on one leg and go through those ranges of motion for the RDL and the airplane without any assistance anywhere I tell you to, right? Because that shows a strong, stable, functioning hip. With a lot of this stuff, there's just too much movement in the spine. There's too much lack of awareness through everything. And you're not really actually challenging any of these ranges of motion, right? Because even if you look at this, the goal here, it looks like, is to get this knee over the bench. And I want you to watch the hip. So that hip turns. So that's creating that range of motion. He's not challenging the glute med here on the left side, or which would be his right leg. He's not challenging this at all. He's literally opening up the hip to create that range of motion and then twisting away. It doesn't have the same base here. He's bending this elbow. And like, this isn't really doing anything for your hip. This is like, I don't know how to describe this. This is like dipping a piece of candy in sugar, I guess. I don't know. Maybe that's not a good example, but like, it's just not really doing anything for you, and it's not adding anything to the equation. So, and you can see as he's moving through, again, the hips turn, the spine is flexed, you're tilting away. So he's essentially just doing this he's not getting the benefit he thinks he is, right? And I think with a lot of these movements, there's a lot that's really beneficial, right? Like the med ball single leg RDL, that's great, but this hip gate, not necessary. It's just adding a piece of it that I don't think is necessary and can be worked on in other ways. What do we got here? Like this, I would say, is unnecessary. Let's see the rest of these videos. These are very beneficial. I think this is good. Yeah, like I think, like, again, you're missing a really crucial piece here by coming up and driving that leg out to the side. You're missing that really important contraction of the glute as we're coming through and really challenging this range of motion. I just think that knee drive is just not necessary through this movement. This is beneficial as well. I always like those. This type of stretching can be beneficial. I just think stretching can be done in a lot of ways. And as you can see with this, right? So like this sort of movement, people are very fond of these types of movements, but you can see that movement from the hip isn't coming from the hip. It's coming from him tilting, right? So he's tilting, creating that, position of the spine that's creating that movement, allowing him to move. And then he's shifting his spine, not really moving anything at the hip, which is the hard part. So that's where it's just like, again, a lot of these movements, they feel nice, they look taxing, but they're not actually providing that sort of thing. Really, if you do RDLs and you do airplanes and you get really good at those, along with some lunging, you're going to be perfect, and you're going to work on all the aspects that you need in regards to, like, mobility for the hip. I think we'll do one or two more. Running a conjugate program from Zach Goodman doesn't mean you have to use bands, chains, and specialty equipment. Simply just use a dynamic, strength, and repeated stimulus every session. Example, dumbbell jump, dynamic, box squat, strength, split squat, repeated. I've been utilizing conjugate for a while, and a version of that condensed conjugate. And I think, again, the stimulus is to create accommodated resistance, right? Like the stimulus is to create power. The stimulus is to create strength, and the stimulus is to continue to be able to do that over the course of time. And in conjugate, they do this in a couple different ways because they don't do a lot of jumps, or they don't do a lot of, what would be considered plyometric work. They sub that in for band work. They sub that in for dynamic effort lifts or chain lifts, because it creates that same idea throughout the motion, right? When you use a chain on a squat, for example, when you get towards the bottom of that squat, the chain starts hitting the ground and it takes some weight away. As you start to stand up, what was 135 pounds at the bottom now becomes 155 pounds at the top, because the chain is coming off the ground and now you're supporting that weight, right? The opposite goes with a band. As you start to come down towards the bottom, that weight becomes less, right? But as you're starting to stand up, that band tension is pulling down on the ground a little bit more, and it's adding accommodated resistance, which is more of like a speed thing, right? So think about it as you start to you stand through the squat. The strongest part of your squat is adding more load. And a lot of the times when we look at benching or squatting or deadlifting, we have sticking points, right? We have pieces of the pie or pieces of the movement that aren't as strong as the others. And then accommodated resistance allows us to create more adaptation in the strongest part of most of our squats, which is the standing or the locking out, and the deadlift or the bench. So that's where it's really important, and that stuff carries over. But it doesn't have to be bands and chains and those types of things. It can be explosive jumps, right? We can work on a lot of this movement through plyometrics, through depth drops, through broad jumps, through landing mechanics, things like that. For the upper body, we can work on this through throws, extensions, rotations, all those types of things. And as long as you're doing it in the right way and you're hitting a fully dynamic movement that's allowing you full output or full intent, and then you're fully expressing strength, and then you're fully expressing accessory work, you're going to be good and you're going to move in the right direction. So I may have talked about this one last time. I don't know. Yeah, I think we'll end it there. Because I think everything else I spoke about today. But once again, if you guys do want to join the Coach Connect and you want to hear more about my philosophy on coaching and things like that, please join. If when you're done, there's a video that's going to pop up here, the standard. Click on that, watch it. It's my new training program. Just gives you a little bit of an understanding of where we're at with it, and what you get from it. And I appreciate you guys tuning in. See you guys next time. Peace.